The histories of the Dunedain, the men of Westernese, began at the start of the Second Age of Sun, for the Dunedain were the remnant of the Edain of the First Age. These people were honored by the Valar and given a land that lay in the Western Sea, between Middle-earth and the Undying Lands. This place was called Númenóri, Westernese in the common tongue of men. The history of the Dunedain of that time is told in the Akellabeth and in the tale of the Númenóreans, for the Dunedain of Númenóri were known by that name. These people were mighty, and their downfall was terrible when their land was plunged beneath the sea and the belly of the world was torn out. In that holocaust, all the Númenóreans were lost, except those known as the Black Númenóreans, who in earlier times had gone to the southern haven of Umbar, and those known as the Elendili, who made the realms of Arnor and Gondor. So when the histories speak of the Dunedain, they most often mean the Elendili, the faithful. The histories of Middle-earth tell how, in the year 3319 of the Second Age of Sun, 9 ships came upon a great wave out of the western sea. These were the ships of Elendil the Tall, who, with his sons, brought the faithful Dunedain to Middle-earth. Elendil then made Arnor, the north kingdom of the Dunedain, and built Annúminas as its first city near the elven lands of Lindon, while Anarion and Isildur went to the south and made Gondor, the south kingdom of the Dunedain, and built Osgiliath as its first city. In Arnor were the extensive provinces of Rudar, Cardolan, and Arthedain, whereas in Gondor were the fiefs and territories of Anorion, Ithilien, Lebanon, Lossarnach, Labadon, Amphalas, Tolfalas, Belfalas, and Calantarodon. The Dunedain prospered peacefully for a century of that age while they strengthened their new kingdoms, but another power was also growing. Out of Mordor came Sauron and the Nazgul, and orcs and men of many races who were his thralls. So there was war once again, but a pact was made that in later times was named the last alliance of elves and men. Gil-galad, the last high king of the elves of Middle-earth, led the elves of Lindon, and Elendil commanded the Dunedain. Sauron's servants fell before their strength, and Sauron himself was forced into battle at last. And although Elendil, Anarion, and Gil-galad were all killed, so too was the power of the ring-wraiths, and Sauron ended. Isildur cut the ring from Sauron's hand, and Sauron, the ring-wraiths, and all his servants went into the shadows. This was the war that ended the Second Age of Sun. With Sauron gone, a time of peace was anticipated, but the Third Age was also doomed to end in bloody war, for Isildur did not destroy Sauron's ring, and within the ring a terrible power remained. In the second year of the Third Age, Isildur was ambushed upon Gladden fields, slain by black orc arrows, and the ring was lost in the river Anduin. So, as the Red Book of Westmarch and the Annals of the Kings and Rulers tell, though there was peace for a time, strife was doomed to return to the Westlands. The Dunedain were attacked from all sides, Belkoth and Wain Riders out of Rhûn, Black Númenóreans and Haradrim from the south, Variags from Khand, Orcs and Dunlendings from the Misty Mountains, Hillmen and Trolls from the Etenmoors, and ring-wraiths risen once again in Mordor, Angmar, Morgul, and Dol Guldur. So did the Third Age pass, with the Dunedain warring with those who were driven by a single force that had at last regained a form and resided in the mighty tower of Barad-dûr in Mordor, Sauron, the Ring Lord. At times the Dunedain grew still more powerful in those years, and their lands increased far into Rhûn and Harad. But through the centuries they were like sea cliffs, worn down by the tides. Arnor as a kingdom was broken apart, and in 1975 the last city of Arnor fell. Though an heir to the throne remained hidden in the lands, this Dunedain kingdom was completely lost. After that time, in the north, those who were rightful kings of the Dunedain were only chieftains. In the south, though frequently besieged and threatened, most of the Dunedain kingdom of Gondor remained intact and strong, yet the royal line was broken, and the kingdom was ruled by stewards. Through the Third Age, Sauron's power increased, until at last he came forth openly in war, determined to drive the Dunedain and the elves from the world, and make Middle-earth his domain forever. This was the War of the Ring, which ended the Third Age, and its history is told in the Red Book of Westmarch. In that war, among the Dunedain of the north rose Aragorn, son of Arathorn, the one true heir of Isildur, and rightful king of all the Dunedain of Middle-earth. His knights were the Rangers of the North, horsemen armed with spear and sword in hooded travelers' cloaks of forest green and high leather boots. Aragorn himself went about the land in this guise, weather-worn, yet strong, brave, and keen of eye. In that time he was called Strider, but in the many adventures of his long life he went by other names. He was Estel among the elves of Rivendell in his youth, and Thorongil as the captain of Gondor who went to the south and destroyed the fleets of Umbar. During the War of the Ring he fought at the Hornburg, Pelargir, Pelennor Fields, and before the Black Gate of Mordor itself. He proved to be a true leader of men, and as the heir of Isildur was crowned King Elisar Telcontar, ruler of all the Dunedain of the twin realms of Gondor and Arnor after the War of the Ring. Upon his succession, Aragorn was totally transformed from rugged ranger into a king, fierce and lordly, yet glad, wise, and elven-eyed. He was enthroned and crowned beneath 3 banners, green, blue, and sable, Rohan, Dol Amroth, and Gondor. He wore the white crown of the Dunedain, the tall warrior's helm of mithril with white seabird's wings of pearl and silver. A circlet of 7 adamant gems was set upon it, and a single elf gem on the crown glowed with a bright, clear light. Aragorn was compared with the noblest of the Númenóreans of old, and even with the elven lords. Indeed, he took the elf princess Arwen Undulmiel as his queen, and they ruled wisely over the Westlands long into the 4th Age, and brought peace to all the people of Middle-earth. Mightiest of elves who inhabited Middle-earth were the Noldor, and most far famed in the songs and tales that have come to the ears of men. For these were the elves who wrought the great jewels called the Silmarils, as well as the Rings of Power. The mightiest wars that were ever known to elves and men were fought over these great works. Of the Eldar who came to the Undying Lands, the Noldor were the second kindred. The name Noldor means knowledge, which above all the elves they strove hardest to possess. In the years of the Trees of the Valar, their king was Finwë, and at that time great was their joy in learning from their tutors, the Valar and Maiar. In that golden and silver light everlasting, the Noldor grew strong and noble. Their city of Tirion on the green hill Tuna, which looked over the starlit sea, was mighty and beautiful. For the city was built in the pass of light called Calakiria, the only passage through the vast Pelori Mountains, which enclosed the lands of Eldamar and Valinor. Through this gap flowed the light of the trees, and it fell on the west of the city. To the east, in the shadow of Tuna, the elves looked on the stars that shone over the shadowy seas. So it was that the Noldor became wise people, but they especially excelled in the crafts of Aiuli, maker of mountains. They cut the great towers of Eldamar from rock and carved many things of beauty out of radiant white stone. They were first to bring forth the gems that lay in the mountain heart. They gave the stones freely, and the mansions of the elves and the Valar glinted with the gems of the Noldor, and the very beaches and pools of Eldamar, it is said, shone with the scattered light of gems. To the king of the Noldor and his queen Miriel was born a son named Finwë, who was called Fëanor, which is Spirit of Fire. Of all craftsmen who learned the skills of Aiuli, Fëanor was mightiest. Even among the Maiar there was none to surpass him. For he was first to make those magical elf gems that were brighter and more magical than the earth stones. They were pale in the making, but when set under starlight, they were compared to the eyes of the elves, for they took on the light of the stars and shone blue and bright. Fëanor also made other crystals called Palantiri, the Seeing Stones, which were the magical stones that, many ages later, the elves of Avaloni gave to the Dunedain. But greatest of the deeds of Fëanor was the making of those 3 fabulous gems that captured the mingled light of the trees of the Valar within their crystals. These were the most beautiful jewels that the world had ever seen, for they shone with a living light. Yet, as is told in the Quenta Silmarillion and the Noldolanti, the high ambitions of Fëanor, coupled with the evil deeds of Melkor, led to the greatest bane that was ever known to the elven people. For Melkor came forth, and with the spider Ungoliant destroyed the trees of the Valar, slew Finwë, and stole the Silmarils. Fëanor swore an oath of vengeance that was a curse on his people forevermore. In anger he followed Melkor, whom he named Morgoth, the dark enemy of the world, to Middle-earth. So began the War of the Jewels and the Wars of Beleriand, which was fought throughout all the days of the First Age's sun. During this age of war, the Noldor also brought great gifts to Middle-earth. For a time there arose the Noldor kingdoms in Hithlum, Dorlomin, Nevrast, Mithrin, Dorthonion, Himland, Thorgelion, and East Beleriand. Fairs of the Noldor realms were the 2 hidden kingdoms, Gondolin, which is ruled by Turgon, and Nargothrond, which is held by Finrod Felagund. In the War of the Jewels, Fëanor was slain, as were all his 7 sons, Amras, Amrod, Caranthir, Killigorm, Curufin, Maedhros, and Maglor. His brother Fingolfin and Fingolfin's children Fingon, Turgon, and Eredhel were also killed by Morgoth. And though Finarfin, the other brother and third son of Finwë, had remained in the Undying Lands where he ruled the remnant of the Noldor and Tirion, all his children went to Middle-earth, and his 4 sons, Egnor, Angrod, Finrod Felagund, and Orodreth, were killed. So of all the Noldor lords and their children, only Finarfin's daughter Galadriel survived on Middle-earth. Through the years of the First Age, Morgoth and his servants destroyed all the Noldoran kingdoms. At that time, there was in Beleriand many other people whom doom in part was tied to that of the Noldor. Because of these wars, the realms of the Grey Elves, who were also called the Sindar, were destroyed, as were the dwarf realms of Nogrod and Belegost, and most of the kingdoms of the 3 houses of the Edain. But finally, the Valar and the Maiar came forth out of the Undying Lands against Morgoth. Thus occurred the great battle and the War of Wrath. Before this mighty force Angband fell, and Morgoth was cast into the eternal void forever. Yet the struggle was so great that Beleriand was broken, and most of the land was swallowed up beneath the sea. Of all the royal lines in the Noldor, few who survived the War of the Jewels could claim direct descent. So it was that Gil-galad, son of Finrod, son of Fingolfin, set up the last Noldor high kingdom in mortal lands. This was in Lindon, the last part of Beleriand to remain after the great battle. With Gil-galad lived Celebrimbor, son of Curufin, only prince of the house of Fëanor to live into the Second Age. Galadriel, daughter of Finarfin, Elrond and Elros the Half-Elven, and many Sindar lords also came, as well as Círdan of the Falathrim, the Lequendi, and the Edain, the men who were loyal to the elves during the wars. At that time, many of the elves took ships from the Grey Havens and sailed to Tol Eressëa in the Bay of Eldamar in the Undying Lands, and built there the city of Avaloni. The Edain were also given a fair island in the Western Sea called Numenori, and they too left the lands of Middle-earth. Yet all those of royal Noldoran line remained. Gil-galad ruled Lindon, and Círdan held the Grey Havens. But in the year 750 of the Second Age, it is said Celebrimbor came out of Lindon and made a kingdom at the foot of the Misty Mountains in the land of Eregion, near the dwarf realm of Khazad-dûm. These elves were named the Gwathi Myrdain, the people of the jewel-smiths, and the elven smiths in the legends of later times. It was here, through subtle persuasions of Sauron, that the rings of power were forged. These were made by Celebrimbor, grandson of Fëanor, who created the Silmarils. And so was wrought the second great work of the Noldor, over which another cycle of bitter wars was fought. For Sauron at that time made the one ring that would rule all the other works of the Noldor. In anger and fear the elves arose, and the war of Sauron and the elves was fought. Celebrimbor and most of the Gwathi Myrdain were slain. Eregion was laid waste, and though Elrond Half-Elven came with an army, all he could do was rescue those few who remained and take refuge in Imladris, which men called Rivendell. There the only Noldor stronghold between the Blue and Misty Mountains was made. In this time Lindon itself was in peril, but descendants of the Edain, the Númenóreans, brought their immense fleets and drove Sauron into the east. Later still they returned and captured the Dark Lord, but they did not destroy him. They held him prisoner, and in this way came their downfall, for he turned them against the Valar, and they were swallowed into the sea for their folly. So Sauron returned to Middle-earth, where only the Noldoran realms of Lindon and Rivendell stood, though the kingdoms of Greenwood the Great and Lothlorien had been built with Noldoran and Sindarin nobles and Sylvan subjects. But with Sauron's return there was war again. The last alliance of elves and men was made, and in that war which ended the Second Age, Gil-galad and the king of the Dunedain were slain by Sauron, but Sauron himself was destroyed with all the realm of Mordor. Thereafter there was no high king of the Noldoran elves in Middle-earth, yet the kingdoms remained. The lordship of Lindon and the Grey Havens fell to Círdan, while Elrond still ruled in Rivendell. During the Third Age, the most beautiful kingdom was Lothlorien, where Queen Galadriel reigned, the noblest Noldor still to live in Middle-earth. Though few Noldor lived among those named the Galadrim in the Golden Wood, it was the brightest and most like the Noldoran realms of old. As is told in the Red Book of Westmarch, when at the end of the Third Age the One Ring was unmade and Sauron was destroyed, Elrond was summoned out of Rivendell, and Galadriel came out of Lothlorien to the white ships that would take them into the Undying Lands. With the queen gone, Lothlorien faded. The Noldoran kingdoms of Middle-earth dwindled in the years of the Fourth Age. And it is said that Círdan the Shipwright took the last of the Noldor to the Undying Lands. There dwell now the remnants of the Noldoran people who suffered most grievously, inflicted the greatest sorrow, did the greatest deeds, and won the most fame of all the elves in the tales that have come down through the ages. What their deeds have been since the sailing of the last ship, only the great music at the end shall make known to those who live in mortal lands.